that we were the only people who had made a proposal
Helen, no,
to do
I can't hear you.
something. So we said, well, we'll make an exhibition.
Hey, Helen, I can't hear you.
Really?
Yeah,
You mean I've been talking all this time and people can't hear me?
yeah.
Oh.
Okay. Yeah, why don't you? Can you hear me when I just normally talk? Nope. Here, why don't you take this and I'll take that. Okay.
Okay, is this better?
How about give me this?
Okay.
So, we did a lot of watershed works. We did a lot of inventing. Like, we were asked, could we control the flood control from on the Oder River from the Czech Republic over through Poland to Germany? And so we said, sure, and we made a design for it, wherein we said, all you need to do is catch the water upriver where the farmlands are small, are cheap, and you can make many little floodplains, at which point you would handle the flood problems.
That is, you return the floodplain to the river. You just wouldn't return it in the space where it was normally. And therefore, that would be fine, except for one thing. They sort of liked the idea. They said, Poland really takes all the flooding. We don't have too much trouble here. But, of course, they did. But anyway, we laughed at them, but we said, okay, you don't want to think about it. And, of course, this was the year that the EU was giving Poland all the money it needed to construct the dams and the ways to protect the cities from flooding. So they were going to do that, at which point, of course, it would come down to Germany.
So the next time there are really heavy rains, their Potsdam will be flooded. So be it. We told them so. When the floods come, we're going to drop them a note. Next. So the real issue here was, could we invent an icon that would slowly get into people's awareness that the high grounds of Europe were one place, and the concept that we had was that a pine forest that they had made there up top was never going to sequester enough water and never purify enough water to deal with the problems that were coming from global warming. And so we said, look, what you really need to do is reforest the top end of every river appropriately. Look at the Pacific Northwest floor that you saw. Then if you did that, the waters would come down pure, and you would have a vast purification system, which the mountains originally were.
Yeah.
On top of that, next, we had big maps on the floor, and kids used to play on them. Next, on top of that,
They're looking at rivers that are going down. There is a whole series of European rivers there, and they could see.
And that, on top of that was the idea that, the glaciers are melting. The glacial melt and the snow that fell on them once fed many of the rivers in Europe. When the glaciers finally finish melting and the snow is only rain, why then you're going to have dry riverbeds and flooded riverbeds. And so we have a proposal on the table right now to invent a new kind of forestry that is paleobotanical in nature, where you find the historic forest types that were there maybe 3 million years ago when the weather was similar.
At the end of the Pleistocene.
Next.
I mean, the beginning of the Pleistocene, the end of the Pliocene.
Helen, I can't hear you.
At the period in history, at the beginning of the Pleistocene era, there was a time when the temperatures were very similar to what a number of scientists predicted we would be getting into in the next 100 or 2 years. Therefore, we were looking back at that time, for trees and plants that lived well in that time. And then how many of them would have relatives living in the present day, so we could begin to think about replanting.
And so therefore we would end up doing translatitudinal research as well.
Yeah.
Not that I want to bore you with research, but we're not bored with it. It's really interesting stuff. So the thing is that that's now under consideration. We have a team of scientists starting on it, and the question is, we really why would you want that forest up there? Well, with the glaciers gone, you really need to replace them with a forest, a multi-use forest that has its roots going down variously so that the land can become a sponge again. If it becomes a sponge, the sponge phenomena generated by the forest will replace some of the glacial melt. The concept here is that scale models don't work when you're facing this kind of a situation. It's real. Europe's got 2.4 million square miles of farm. A third of it's going to go out of production in the next 100 years with drought. Well, when you're facing that kind of an issue, you really need to think at the scale of the problem. In truth, they're going to need to plant about 600,000 or 700,000 square kilometers of new forest if they want to counter this issue. And we're in the process of proposing it and seeing if it can be done. I think that with next.
And we have a number of our good friends who are botanists at the University of Vienna, the University of Bonn, Euronatur, and other things who are all set to work with us. If we can raise enough money for the meeting, and even in Germany, in Munich, there's an institute, a scientific institute, that is very eager to write up a very big grant, but they aren't eager to give us enough money to bring the various people together so we can write the grant. We need these scientific experts with us who have agreed to it, who like the idea, and we have to get together. Anyway. Yes.
So the issue here is in this particular thing is how we arrive at an icon. And that would be the field of play, that would be the high ground, that would be a 3-inch, that can operate 3 inches, and it can operate 30 feet. And we're trying our best right now to see if we can't invent a unifying trans-European icon at this scale, which is one of the reasons why the EU funded us in the first place. Next.
All right.
So people use our stuff the way they wish. This is in Toulouse. Next. We're going to end with a work called Greenhouse Britain.
Newt, I would like to end this section with the thing on Peninsula Europe before we go in.
I thought you were going to read this after Greenhouse Britain.
All right. I think it belongs here after.
We negotiate these things out, you know. You want to do it here instead of... Yeah. Okay.
We believe a vision such as that embodied in Peninsula Europe must have the power, the clarity, the timelessness, the openness of structure, the ambiguity that will permit others to grasp it and work with it and test it, to create with it, to play with it, to improvise with it. A vision must also, in many senses, be prima facie a valuable thing to be enacting. It often has embedded in it its mirror image, which is a reflection on the outcome of not doing it. Moreover, it must have sufficient ambiguity so that there are alternative ways to enact it. In whatever form it takes, envisioning is a process that can never complete itself, as every act in the process that follows feeds back to and affects the perceived shape of the vision as first stated. The envisioning we have done in presenting Peninsula Europe as a work in process must create a consensus among many that it has intrinsic value for diverse people and cultures. If it is too authoritarian or too idealistic or too unfamiliar in that the ideas have no precedent, or if it seems too fantastic or too far from possible, the vision will be put aside as simply one more curiosity. Moreover, a vision of the sort we propose in Peninsula Europe will not work if it is wholly new information. The parts, although fragmented, disassociated from each other, must